the king the Queen Princess Birgitta Carl XVI Gustaf as King of Sweden. He ascended the throne on the death of his grandfather, King Gustaf VI Adolf, on the 15th of September 1973. He is the youngest child and only son of Prince Gustaf Adolf, Duke of Västerbotten, and Princess Sibylla of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. His father died on the 26th of January 1947 in an airplane crash in Denmark when Carl Gustaf was 9 months old. Upon his father's death, he became second in line to the throne, after his grandfather, the then Crown Prince Gustaf Adolf, following the death of his great-grandfather King Gustaf V in 1950. Gustaf Adolf ascended the throne and thus Carl Gustaf became Sweden's new crown prince and heir apparent to the throne at the age of 4. Shortly after he became king in 1973, the new 1974 instrument of government took effect, formally stripping Carl XVI Gustaf of his remaining executive power. As a result, he no longer performs many of the duties normally accorded to a head of state, such as the formal appointment of the Prime Minister, signing off on legislation, and being commander-in-chief of the nation's military. The new instrument explicitly limits the king to ceremonial functions and, among other things, to be regularly informed of affairs of state. As head of the House of Bernadotte, Carl Gustaf has also been able to make a number of decisions about the titles and positions of its members. The king's heir apparent, after passage on the 1st of January 1980 of a new law establishing absolute primogeniture, is Crown Princess Victoria, the eldest child of the king and his wife, Queen Sylvia. Before the passage of that law, Crown Princess Victoria's younger brother, Prince Carl Philip, was briefly the heir apparent. As of his birth in May 1979, Carl XVI Gustaf is the longest reigning monarch in Swedish history, having surpassed King Magnus IV's reign of 44 years and 222 days on the 26th of April 2018. Carl Gustaf was born on the 30th of April 1946 at 10:20 in Haga Palace in Solna, Stockholm County. He was the youngest of 5 children and the only son of Sweden's Prince Gustaf Adolf and Princess Sibylla. He was christened at the Royal Chapel on the 7th of June 1946 by the Archbishop of Uppsala, Erling Adam. He was baptized in Charles XI's baptismal font, which stood on Gustav III's carpet. He lay in Charles XI's cradle with Oscar II's crown beside him. The same christening gown in white linen batiste which the prince carried had been worn by his father in 1906 and would later be worn by his 3 children. His godparents were the Crown Prince and Crown Princess of Denmark, the Crown Prince and Crown Princess of Sweden, and Count Folke and Countess Maria Bernadotte of Wisborg. Prince Carl Gustaf was also given the title of the Duke of Jutland. His father, Prince Gustaf Adolf, Duke of Västerbotten, was killed in an airplane crash on the 26th of January 1947 at Copenhagen Airport. His father's death had left the 9-month-old prince second in line for the throne, behind his grandfather, then Crown Prince Gustaf Adolf. When his paternal great-grandfather Gustaf V died in 1950, the 4-year-old prince became the heir apparent of Sweden. Carl Gustaf was 7 years old before he was told about his father's death. He expressed his feelings about growing up without knowing his father in a speech in 2005. His earliest education was received privately at the Royal Palace. The young prince was then sent to Brahms School, and then on to Sigtuna boarding school. After graduating from high school in 1966, Carl Gustaf completed 2.5 years of education in the Swedish Army, the Royal Swedish Navy, and the Swedish Air Force. During the winter 1966-1967 he took part in a round-the-world voyage with the mine-laying vessel Alfsnabben. The Crown Prince received his commission as an officer in all 3 services in 1968, eventually rising to the rank of captain and lieutenant. Before his ascension to the throne, he also completed his academic studies in history, sociology, political science, tax law, and economics at Uppsala University and later economics at Stockholm University. To prepare for his role as the head of state, Crown Prince Carl Gustaf followed a broad program of studies on the court system, social organizations and institutions, trade unions, and employers' associations. In addition, he closely studied the affairs of the Riksdag, government, and Ministry for Foreign Affairs. The Crown Prince also spent time at the Swedish mission to the United Nations and the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, worked at a bank in London and at the Swedish Embassy there, at the Swedish Chamber of Commerce in France, and at the Alfa Laval Company factory in France. In 1970 he represented the king at the head of the Swedish delegation to the World Exposition in Osaka, Japan. Since his youth, the present monarch has been a strong supporter of the Scout movement in Sweden. Carl Gustaf has dyslexia, as do his daughter Crown Princess Victoria and his son.